Hey everyone! If you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's MIKEYOPP.com. Thanks! Hi, I'm Mike Oppenheim, and you are listening to Coffin Talk, Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. And this week, coming to us live from Louisiana, one of my all-time favorite places, is Devanin Hubert, and he is the author of Sex, Drugs, and Jesus, a memoir about his struggles with drug addiction, homelessness, and serving in the armed forces, as well as an HIV plus diagnosis and rejection from his church for sexuality. He's also the host of the same-named podcast, Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast, and he's the owner of Down Under Apparel. There's so much more to explore with this awesome man. So without any further delays, how are you, Devanin?
I am fantastic. How about you?
I'm doing really good. We have just moved into a new house, and we finally have stuff in order. So you're our first official podcast in the new place. So thank you for that.
Oh, I'm so honored. There's nothing wrong with getting your house in order, baby.
Yeah. So your bio is spectacular. It's a lot longer, and I try to only read a quip at the beginning. So I'd actually, before we get into all of your life story, we do have our 3 standard questions I'd like to ask you, which is how old are you? Where did you grow up? And what generation, if any, do you consider yourself a member of?
I'm 39. I'll be 40 in December. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but Los Angeles is really where I consider home. That's where I really grew up and became an adult, as far as I'm concerned. And what generation do I consider myself to be a part of? Well, all of them, because I have something in common with everyone.
That's a great answer. I haven't heard that one yet, and I love that. That's awesome. Cool. So yeah, I didn't know about the Los Angeles part, but I'm a San Francisco native, so I'm definitely familiar with LA. So I have the feeling that you're a good storyteller, so it's probably best to kind of let you direct your own interview of yourself. So let's just hear kind of like your life story up until the point of when you were gonna start writing your memoir. So just kind of if you could encapsulate the wild ride up to that.
Well, like I said, grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. There's nothing impressive about that. You know, I'm from the hood. It was like 5 of us in like a 1-bedroom, half of a duplex. So the thing couldn't have been more than 400 or 500 square feet. You know, my brothers and I shared a bunk bed was in the same bedroom as my parents. So we grew up in abject poverty. But you know what? We had food, lots of red beans and rice and jambalaya and gumbo and such. And so, we didn't go to sleep hungry most nights. And so after I got tired of all of this, I went off to the Air Force right when I was 17. I don't know that I recommend going to the Air Force at such a young and tender age, but I did what I did. And so I managed to get out of the Air Force without a dishonorable discharge, but barely. I got a couple of Article 15s because I was a bit of a hellion. I became myself. I started attending raves out there in Tucson, Arizona, and I got all these piercings and stuff, and I started hanging out at Hot Topic and piercing parlors and just becoming my wild, rebellious self that I was destined to be. In the military wasn't having none of that. They weren't interested in my individuality. So we didn't get along so great. I worked on aircraft in Tucson, Arizona at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. Then I leaped on over to San Bernardino County and worked in LA and everything like that. And that's how I came to love Los Angeles so permanently as I do. So I was in there from 2000 through 2006. So yes, I was in for 9/11. That was a whole hot mess. And I made it out without getting my enlistment snatched from my hands and moved to Houston, Texas. So now I'm in Houston, Texas, just 4 hours away from home. I didn't want to come back home, but I did want to get kind of back close as I had been gone since I was a child. Should have stayed in California. And so started going from job to job, working at the Gap Express. Now I'm at the Texas Workforce Commission, recruiting again, just like I was in the Air Force. Did that for a year. Now I'm at Centerpoint Energy at the light company. Well, while I'm here, I'm also volunteering at Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas, because I have a big heart for volunteerism. One of the medals I got when I was in the Air Force was the Military Outstanding Volunteer Service Medal. I have a big heart for any kind of philanthropic, altruistic, all the stuff that has to do with helping someone other than myself. I'm here for it. Was raised in the church and everything like that. I was an altar boy in the Pentecostal church from the 8th grade to the time I graduated high school, always volunteering. So now I'm at Lakewood Church, um, singing in the adult choir, worship leading in the kids ministry, teaching in the kids ministry, my volunteer supervisor in the kids ministry. I tend to go hard at anything I bother to do. Well, this is all well and great until I apply for a job at Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas. And then I had been volunteering there for like 2, 3 years, and they decided to go and check my MySpace page once I had volunteered. That's how long ago this was.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I know what MySpace is, but think Instagram, Facebook, young kids out there.
Yeah, it was the original social media platform before Facebook and everyone else came along. And and so I had a very naughty picture on the front profile. One of me and one of my homegirls had got tipsy one night and decided to do a photo shoot of me, and I ended up just in a cowboy hat and some underwear. And I thought I looked hot, and so I slapped the picture up on my. I mean, I was vain in my 20s, and just like many are, and I do not judge people for looking at themselves, taking all these pictures of themselves. I did the same thing.
I mean, you're not doing it right if you're not that way in your 20s.
Right. I've gotten some better sense now, but you know what it was in those days. And so I had that as my profile picture. I looked good, and then I had spent time as a model before. I modeled for First Models in Houston for a while, and I was also a model on the team board back when department stores and malls used to have team boards back in the day here. So, I wasn't afraid to get in front of a camera. So I was like, hey, let's work it. Well, the people at Lakewood found this picture. Then they also found out through my MySpace page that I was hanging out in Montrose in Houston, Texas. Montrose is the neighborhood. It's like your Castro district in San Francisco, Bourbon Street in New Orleans, West Hollywood in Los Angeles. So you got your Montrose in Houston, Texas. Now, I had done a really good job of keeping the gay side of my life from Lakewood. First mistake, don't ever volunteer anywhere that you can't fully be yourself. But because I shouldn't have lied on the application. When I was applying to volunteer at Lakewood in the kids department, they had on there explicitly, like, if you're not straight, we don't want you around children. And I was like, okay, this is just another one of those military don't ask, don't tell things, okay, I've been doing this for the last 6 years. I was conditioned to be that way. What I should have done was ran and not been willing to suppress a part of myself, even though I wanted to do good. But I was like, I'm not trying to have sex with no little boys. I'm just coming here to volunteer, and then I'm going to go have sex with me some grown men downtown. I'm not trying to, that's not what I'm here for. And besides, in order to volunteer at that church, you have to give them your license, social security card. They do all these background checks and everything. Like, it's not smart to commit a crime if you're going to give people your whole life, all of your information. so no, I wasn't trying to commit any crimes, but they saw that I was hanging out in Montrose. They saw the naughty photos, so they called me in for a meeting. I asked them if I was in trouble because, sometimes I just get that feeling. And my MySpace page views begin to spike, and I was like, I'm not that popular. And so I made the page private so I could see what was going on. Well, it turned out the people at Lakewood started passing the profile around to everyone on staff so they could take a look at this other side of Devon that they just couldn't believe existed, the scandal. And, that I would have an outside life that they couldn't control. And so they lied. They were at least at the point where I had asked them if I was in trouble. The girl in charge of the kids choir and everything was like, no, we just want to have a friendly chat. And so I go up there with my volunteer jersey uniform on. Okay, so just imagine, okay, we're at this long table. They take me up to the 5th floor, which at Lakewood is where all the staff, where the main staff is at. Like, you have to have a key card to get up there. So we're at this long table. It's just the adult pastor and the kids pastor at the one end and me at another. Very creepy. And I didn't even much know that the other guy was going to be there. I thought it was just going to be me and her talking. And so they launch right into their tirade. And she's all like, we saw your picture. We saw what you've been up to. Like they're all like, how could you? I'll never forget her words. She said something like, you can't be doing that, hanging out there with them, referring to the non-straight people. And she talked about us all like we were just like less than human. And I'm all like, okay, well, tell us how you really feel. And so they fired me from all my volunteer positions, which to this day I can't understand how you fire volunteers. And immediately from that day forth, I was no longer, I never felt welcome there. And so that is how I got kicked out of Lakewood Church. Now, some people go, okay, well, did they verbally tell you you can't come back? Then I have to explain to people, like if you kick a person out of one part of an organization, you kick them out of the whole thing. You don't go, hey, you can't do your favorite stuff that made you feel connected to this church, but you can still come, and just kind of hang out. Now, they told me that I could be an usher. I guess they consider an usher to be a demotion or something heathenous, evil, sinful people can do, but not the other stuff. They offered me a conversion therapy package and told me I could be an usher in order to work it. In order to work my way up into the church's graces. And I told them I didn't. Okay, I had just like two decisions on that day. While I'm sitting here looking at these people, I was like, I can either lay hands on them. I'm trying to pick my words without swearing. I was like, so I could either lay hands on, I could either lay hands on them and go to jail. I didn't have any felonies at that point, though I do now, 3 of them or 4, depends on how you want to look at the case. And I can either lay hands on these people and go to jail, or I can just walk out. And so I chose to just walk away. And so since I had been rejected by this church, it made me feel rejected by God, even though God had not rejected me. I had got the two conflated. I don't recommend people to confuse churches with God because they're not the same. And but I made that mistake and I did that, and I caused what they did to me at Lakewood to cause a rift in between me and God. And it would be about 5 years before I ever walked into a church again. And because of that instance that happened. And so I went into the nightlife. I was like, well, I'll go somewhere where I know I'll be accepted. So I started going to more nightclubs. And along with the nightclubs came the more boys, and along with more boys came more narcotics. Now they had boys that offered me drugs before, but I was in the military. I didn't want to get fired, kicked out of the military, or I had to be at church. I was at church like four or 5 days a week, at least 10 hours a week. And I had some time to fill, in my schedule. And so I was angry. I rebelled. And whereas I would have turned down their drugs, I said, no, you know what? I'll take that drug this time. Let's see what this is all about. Let's see what I've been missing out on by being in church. I was in church so much, I didn't even know what Sunday Funday was. Now, Sunday Funday is a popular thing in the straight and gay communities. I didn't know that clubs were open at 11, 12 a.m., 9 a.m. for you to turn up. I had no clue. I had been being in church my whole life. I was somewhere in my late 20s when all this happened. Just finding out what Sunday Funday is. That's how isolated I was due to the time that I was spending at church. Okay, so I started doing everything. Was that ecstasy pill at first? My eyes, I never thought they could look like Steamboat Mickey. Just nothing but black pupils, and just ecstasy was fabulous. Then came the cocaine and all this other stuff. And then I kind of started, buying in bulk because I could afford it. I've made like between 30 and 70 an hour working for the light company now. I was a substation electrician at this point. So I had money, so I was just having some experimentations. I had a 4-day work week. I was working 410, so I could literally be high from Friday evening to Tuesday morning. And so without even having to call in drunk or high or whatever. And so I just got wilder and wilder and wilder. Then I ended up getting HIV. Well, I had hepatitis B first. I went to donate blood because I have O negative blood. I'm all like, everyone wants this. They can have it too. And so I get this letter. Hey, you found hepatitis B antibodies in your blood, so don't bring us your filthy blood anymore, was basically what I got from the letter. So that was an interesting way to find that out. So I don't, so I kind of tried to slow down my whorish ways a little bit, but I guess I didn't do it enough because then I ended up getting HIV. The doctor who was treating me, quote unquote, for the hepatitis found this out and didn't tell my primary care doctor. He waited till New Year's Eve, 2011, to leave my positive HIV diagnosis on my voicemail, which didn't mix well with the array of narcotics that I had lined up to do that night. And so and so from that point on, I started getting sloppy. I was selling more, beginning to become more of a drug dealer at this point. And now I'm starting to get arrested because I'm not thinking straight. So I got the first felony. Ended up being a legal search and seizure because they literally pulled my pants down and whipped my dick out so that I could, because I had my 8 ball of meth stashed under my nuts. And so the cops can get thirsty at times. And so they just went a little bit too far, too fast. And so the grand jury, really ruled that one in my favor. The next time, not so much. I was moving more and more weight. And, at this point, I'm doing crystal meth. It was the last drug that I held off. I was like, I'm not doing that. And eventually I was like, oh, hell, let's just do it. And so that became my response for everything, man. After I got kicked out of church, I used to be like, no, I shouldn't do that. I'm not going to do that. Then I was like, well, just yes to everything. Let's just do it all. And so, but it was like a slow degradation, though. It wasn't instantly. And so now SWAT comes to get me. They sent an informant in to get me, just like they do all great drug dealers. And they set me up, did a few controlled buys and everything like that. From my understanding, they tried to get me a good like 5 or 6 times, but I was always in the move so much it was hard for them to pin me down. And then one night in like May of 2012, I heard the pitter-patter of little feet outside my door after the snitch had just left, dropping off a fresh bottle of Adderall in my house to plant there so that the cops could be sure to find something. And I go up to the door, I look through the peephole, and there's this like men on either side of the door, semi-automatic rifles, face shields, Kevlar vests, and everything. And I'm like, oh no. So I turn to like run and everything like that. I slip and fall, face plant underneath the table. The boom sound happens, the door flies across the foyer, and all of these men come rushing in. I'm thinking I'm just like going to get shot full of bullets at this point, but I'm curled up in the fetal position now underneath the kitchen table, and the cops are looking at me like, okay, this is just like a scared little child. This isn't actually Frank Lucas or John Gotti or, and all of those people. And I was never a violent drug dealer. I just had good business skills. So, and I learned a lot of that from being a military recruiter. I have heard it said that military recruiters make great drug dealers, and it's true. And so I could, I'll just say like this: the people I was getting my meth from were moving about, I think, maybe 2 kilos a day, and so I was moving enough weight to get their attention. I'll just say it like that. So, but I didn't even have to try. I just was myself, and I was fun, and I was outgoing, and I didn't cut the dope, and it was that simple.
I am more than fascinated by your story because there's a lot of points in this story where you've touched on spirituality and disconnection and connection. So I'm kind of curious at this point in the story where I just stopped you, where are you like spiritually? Are you completely lost, or is that like still going on kind of as an undercurrent?
No, at this point, I'm still completely lost. There is a silence in between me and heaven. I'm no longer going to church. I'm no longer praying. I'm no longer fasting. I've quit. I've given up on all tithing. Anything that I used to associate with religion is not happening.
What was motivating you up until the point where you broke? Like, I mean, I completely understand why you broke from the church, and everything you said made more than enough sense to me. So I'm kind of more curious about initially before that break, were you spiritual because it was something you learned as a child and it was just kind of inherited and you just did it and you went along with it? Or did you have like deep spiritual moments in your youth?
Well, we all grow at different points. Now, the Lord revealed himself to me through dreams, because I'm a dreamer and I dream a lot. That's like my primary gift. So I was called at a young age. I had a dream about like a cross that came and appealed to me and stuff like that. Yes, I was raised in church. I had spiritual experiences in church, but I had my most meaningful ones out of church. However, I was not mature enough. I was not as mature as I thought I was, because I did at that point, when I got kicked out of Lakewood, what a lot of people do and conflate God with the church. What I should have done was just found me a different church, maybe a gay affirming church or something like that. But I hadn't yet separated God from the pastors. I hadn't yet separated God from the churches. And when we start out, we may need churches to kind of give us that religious community to get a feel for the life that we're in, or maybe to learn how to read the Bible a little bit. But at some point, and this is why I'm a big advocate of people outgrowing churches and outgrowing preachers now, because it shouldn't be a permanent stop. It's just like we don't stay in college forever. We shouldn't need someone to always teach us about God. We know how to read. We can do this ourselves. But at that point, I wasn't mature enough yet. So I thought that I was there for the right reasons. And I do believe I was there for the right reasons, but there was a level that I hadn't reached yet. So that now when preachers do silly things and crazy things and hurtful things, I don't get angry and throw God, and I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I know how to separate them, but I didn't have that ability then.
And I'm curious because I normally don't bring up the following subjects just because it can, oddly enough, divide people. I think it's actually a unifying thing, but I'm sure you're familiar with the term intersectionality, and I think you're like a very good example of why that word exists and why we should have it. And so, for our audience, just in case they're not aware, intersectionality is something like where you have multiple identities and where do they intersect. So, for example, I'm a white American, but I'm also Cuban. So I have an intersection of Cuban meets white. So for you, I'm curious if like any of this intersectionality was helpful or hurtful as you were like dreaming and conversing with God.
Well, for me, I think it made the right foundation for who I am now. It took me a really, really long time to understand all of my different sections. And I think that probably can be said of, I think, probably most of us throughout this life, because our sections and the things that make us up are subject to change as we grow and evolve, and then as we just grow in awareness. And being the complex individual that I am, it made me attractive to a lot of different nonprofit organizations to volunteer for them, because I do bring value. But then there comes a point where there's certain parts that they don't want. So the main intersectionality is like, okay, if I'm not straight, how much am I really going to be accepted in a regular church? You see, so I have the gifts and the talents to add value, but they have a problem with my personal lifestyle.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think part of why I'm asking this is because I think you're like a very good role model for young people. I mean, we joked and I was laughing along with you about what it's like to be in your 20s. And then when you got into like, you're further and further, what's the word? Path. You're as you went further down the path of not only using drugs, but selling them and just like that lifestyle. I think it, most people, when they make assumptions about people like us, don't make the assumption that we're good people who are making decisions based on like what's happened to us. And so they don't really understand how quote unquote a good person can do quote unquote bad things. And so I see you as like a hero. And I'm sure in your book and on your podcast, you're dealing with this a lot. And so for the purposes of our show, we're trying to explore how our morality comes from spirituality. So, I was going to ask you earlier, but now is probably as good a time as any. What do you think happens to you when you die? And then how does that relate to these dreams and conversations you've had with God?
What happens to us when we die? I had an experience when I was in like high school. I had like from what I was told, it was some sort of like maybe like a heart rhythm thing where I like woke up in the middle of the night. And I think we've heard of teenagers kind of like weirdly dying, like just randomly being on a basketball court or in their sleep. And I woke up and I couldn't catch my breath, so like my breath was leaving. It was leaving away, and it was like I saw down this tunnel, and I saw people I knew, and I saw people that I didn't knew. But the one person I saw that I knew was someone who's dead already. And I thought that I was dying, and because I couldn't breathe, like I couldn't catch my breath, it was leaving, and there was nothing that I could do to force it to stay. But I just happened to wake up the next morning. So So when death comes, like for you, there isn't anything that you can do to prevent it. And so when I was young, I had these visions or these grandeur ideas that I could live forever and everything like that. So I wanted, which is not true. That experience that I have wasn't enough to drill that into me. When I got HIV, I knew that my mortality was a real thing. So the first thing about death is to accept that it is a fact and that it is a part of life. And so what happens when we die, I'm not really an advocate of reincarnation. I don't have any sort of proof to back that up. I can't read through, say, like the Hebrew Bible and find anything to justify that. I do know that the people who have died, like my grandmother, my pastor, Evangelist Nelson, they come back in spirit form and they speak to me like in dreams and stuff like that. People have told about, like, say, a loved one that was close to them may have worn a certain fragrance or something like that, and they may smell that fragrance at times, and they know that that person's spirit is around them. Um, just from the experiences that I've had with the people who have died and who still come back and communicate with me, I know that there must be some sort of awareness that dead people have to what we're doing, and they still have an influence over it. So when I die, my prayer is that I'm able to manifest as a spirit form to help people in the same way that my elders are helping me now.
Damn, that is a great answer. And I mean, I could tell just from like our brief correspondence and everything about reading about you that you were going to be a very kind and humble individual. I was also hopeful that you would be as exciting to talk to and listen to as you are. So that's why I was interested to let you self guide your own story, which I'm glad I did. You're a hell of a storyteller, and I don't mean making up a story. I mean telling your real story. So we are running out of time. We are not out of time. So I really want to give you a few more opportunities to share your immense wisdom. But I just want to take this moment to thank you for not only that answer, but for your service while you're here and alive, and your service after you come back as a spirit. Because I believe in everything, and I'm really open to all interpretations. And I think what you said sounds plausible. So I am curious, going back to your current status. Did you clean up and find Jesus, as they say? Like, what was the how did you nip all that up?
I re-entered the spiritual path like anew. So I started going to like Buddhist temples and doing different things like that. And I think everybody should do the same thing. Check it all out and see what appeals to you. I don't just hang out with people who worship Jesus. Most of my friends don't really have religious affiliations at all, and I don't care, you know. But I went to God and I prayed for myself, you know, and I studied the Bible for myself. I don't go to churches anymore, not because I'm bitter, but because I don't need them. I've outgrown them. Like there's nothing that a preacher can teach me that I cannot open a concordance, look up a commentary, Google it, find it out myself. I don't need them. And churches have agendas and stuff like that, which is a whole other conversation. And I don't want to be a part of their agendas because it tends to be very controlling. Um, And so I believe in God. I believe in God because of the way He's revealed Himself to me, the way He spared my life when I was homeless in Houston and everything like that, and the power that He still manifests through me in my dreams and stuff like that. One of my greatest prayers is for God to reveal Himself personally to people, you know, in a way that they're going to know that He's talking to them. So not me, not any preacher on TV, not the local parishioner, not the priest, for God's sakes, not the priest, you know, and none of those things, you know, we don't have to go through a priest to get to God, you know. So my greatest prayer is that God will reveal Himself to all of us individually in a way that can't be denied, that you just can't deny it. And I started over and I told God, like, look, I've been through so much, and so much lies have been told to me over the years. I got real with God. I was like, I'm just going to start over new. I'm abandoning the concept of right and wrong. I'm just going to learn like a baby starting over and let you tell me what I should and shouldn't be doing so I can get people's voices out of my head.
That's really powerful. And again, I just think it's so exciting. I'm 40. I just turned 40 last year. So, I mean, we're of a similar age. And it's just incredible to hear everyone's journey and how they kind of, not everyone, but most of us get to this point where we're learning that we're learning. And I hear it in all your answers, and I hear it in all your um, the way you recap your life. It's just incredible. So I always give my guests one last word on the podcast. I don't like to end with my own thoughts. So you have the floor. You have the floor of the internet and the people who listen to the show. So what would you like to say to them?
I would just like to say to people to be more open-minded to people who are unlike you, and to be very empathetic and sympathetic towards people who are going through struggles like drug addiction and stuff like that, and to remember, and just even being homeless or in and out of jail, and remember it's never a simple fix, to just be patient with people and stuff like that, and just to show more love. And in terms of spirituality, pick a path, because the spirit and the soul is a part of who you are. So whether it's going to be God or whomever, but just don't leave it untouched. That way you don't fall out of balance. Like, don't leave your spiritual side unattended to. And don't be angry, at preachers and stuff like that, like I was. Don't be jaded. Let the anger go. And focus on what's going to work for you, and not being pissed off at them.
That's awesome. Well, Devan and Hubert, thank you so much. You have led a very awesome life, and I'm sure there's many, many, many awesome more years ahead of you. So please go to sexdrugsandjesus.com and check out his stuff and listen to his podcast. And also just please listen to the words of all these guests, because week after week we're getting the same messages from everyone, which is listen more, love more, be tolerant of yourself. And I think that's a great way to go out. So for everyone listening at home, my name is Mike Oppenheim. You've been listening to Coffin Talk, and we will see you soon.
And I feel that you're near me, and I see you on the moon, and then I see that you see me, and I see